black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know. I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at sasquatchchronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Thanks for taking the time to listen, too, by the way. I really appreciate it, you guys. Got a cool show planned for you tonight. Going to be talking to William Sheehan, and he's the author of Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters, Volume 1 through 4. And Bill's going to be sharing some of the encounters from his books tonight. If you get a chance, go pick it up on Amazon. I have all 4 copies, and holding it here in my hand. It's actually a pretty cool book. A lot of cool encounters. It's kind of like Sasquatch Chronicles, but in a written form. Very cool stuff, and I'm so glad Bill's willing to come on and share some of the encounters. So definitely check out his book. If you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com, and if you get a chance, please check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member, get additional shows. I know on Friday night I talked to Matt, and Matt had two great encounters, and then we got in a conversation about whether one of these creatures should be shot or tranquilized, and I really appreciated my conversation with Matt. Very well-educated guy, very smart man. If you get a chance, check it out. It was episode 472. The name of it is I Knew I Was About to Die, and when you listen to his encounter, it's hard to disagree with that statement. Very cool show. I hope you get a chance. Check it out. SasquatchChronicles.com. Again, thank you guys for being here tonight. Let's jump into it. Bill, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Wes. It's a pleasure to be with you. I told you that I'm a newfound listener to your podcast, and I enjoy it very much.
Well, I appreciate you listening, Bill. Thank you for that. You know, time is a precious thing, so thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. I really do appreciate it. And I know we're going to get into some of these encounters. I started reading the book last night. I have all 4 volumes of it, and I've been really enjoying reading these encounters. What made you write the book? Did you have an encounter, or has it been more or less a lifelong obsession with this topic? What got you into? What made you take the time to write a book on this?
Well, I grew up around, my father was a pilot, and he was a weather observer for the FAA. And hanging around with him, I gained an ability to become what I call an observer. Cloud formations, constellations, bird watchers. There was a time in my life when I could name every plane that was in the sky, be they military or commercial. At some point, after, I guess, first seeing the Patty film, maybe back in the 70s, it's so long ago I don't remember, I was instantaneously a believer that these creatures were out there, and that belief has never waned for me. The problem being that I, like most people, only had available to me what little was in print, and of course the same real clips via television that we see over and over again. And no, I didn't ever see a Bigfoot for myself, but I was convinced that they were real and kind of was grieving a little bit that I couldn't find more data. So I took it upon myself with a considerable amount of time, money, and effort to begin gathering together evidence by various means, which then amassed to be so much that, as you know, I'm a writer, and I decided to enter in on writing these books about Bigfoot. And the amount of evidence, testimonials available is just overwhelming, as I think that you and the listening audience will see.
Yeah, it is. And I'm glad you put it together this way. You know, a lot of times guys, they get together and they'll write a book about their theories. And, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit down and read a book about some guy's theories. But I do love encounters. And I think the audience in general loves encounters. I think if I brought on a quote-unquote expert and just talked about Bigfoot, I don't think anyone would listen. I wouldn't listen. And that's what I love about the books. I almost would love to write something like this. I'm a terrible writer, but to have the encounters documented in written form. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the bodies, and I want to go over some of these encounters in the book. Let's talk about the roadkill evidence. It's in Volume 4. Walk us into that encounter, if you would, Bill.
Yeah, it's fairly brief. Having given it much thought, knowing I was going to be here with you today, I said to myself, I put a lot of time and effort into writing this out and proofing it so it would sound good. And I think I'll just read it back to you. It's very interesting, very brief. It came from a couple named Wilfreda and Helena Gomez, who were living in Massachusetts at the time of this incident. And I'm going to begin with Wilfredo, and then we'll end with Helena a few paragraphs in. Wilfredo said to me that my wife and I were returning home on the interstate one night in December of 2009. In the distance, as we were coming up a grade, we saw a semi-truck on the shoulder with its flashers on. As we got closer, there was quite a bit of blood on the pavement and some pieces of debris from the truck, like broken lenses and a mirror laying in the road. We were driving quite slowly as we were approaching the truck and had noticed something on the shoulder which we believed to be a bear or a moose. Suffice to say, it was something very large, and it appeared that it was what had collided with the truck up ahead. We pulled up on the truck and got out. Walking over to the cab, we saw the driver was still inside. I grabbed the side rail and jumped up on the fuel tank to check on the driver. He was sitting in the seat with his head in his hands, still behind the wheel of the truck. I tapped on the window and asked him if he was all right, and it took him a few seconds to respond as he rolled down the window. I could see that he was in shock, and he didn't answer right away. About a minute later, while I was telling my wife, Helena, to call the police, he said to me, "I just crashed into a damn Bigfoot that was running across the road back there chasing a doe." I said to him, "You hit a what?" He repeated himself, saying that he had just demolished the front end of his truck, hitting a Bigfoot that was crossing the highway. I climbed down from the cab and walked to the front of the truck. The lights were still on, and the entire grille, front bumper, and hood was buckled inward. The left front fender and headlamp were demolished, and the truck was leaking water from what appeared to be the radiator. It was about 10 minutes later when a trooper came roaring down the highway, and an ambulance soon followed. At this time, the driver still had not come out of the cab. He was sitting there in silence and holding his head. As the trooper drove up, we told him briefly what we knew had happened, and he jumped up to talk to the man. Moments later, a second ambulance came to the scene as well as another trooper. The driver was now out of the truck and talking. About 300 feet behind the truck, the animal was on the side of the road. my wife Helena stayed by our car while one of the troopers and I started walking back to it. He had his gun drawn and told me to stay behind him. He said that if the animal is still alive, it may jump up and try to hurt us. The trooper had a powerful flashlight with an expandable beam, and I was walking maybe 15 feet behind him as we approached the animal. As soon as the light hit it, I saw the blackened face of a gorilla-type beast with blood pouring out of its mouth. I actually saw one of its eyes blink and its hand move slightly. I knew immediately that this was no moose or anything else that is known to be in these woods. It was exactly as the driver had said. He had crashed into a Bigfoot with his truck. The trooper told me to go back by the truck, and as soon as I had reached it, he fired 3 rounds at point-blank range into the creature to put him down. A few minutes later, he took report from us as to what the driver had told us. We overheard as well what the driver was saying to the ambulance crew and the other trooper. He said that he was fairly certain that he was going to hit the deer and was trying all evasive measures in a short period of time not to do so, saying that the trailer brakes had locked up and the trailer had begun to swing wide when all of a sudden the Bigfoot was now squarely in front of the truck and unavoidable. He said when he hit the beast, he wasn't wearing his seatbelt, and the impact caused him to fly forward, smashing the windshield with his forehead, which explained to me why he was sitting there in a daze holding his head. Thank God he wasn't cut or bleeding, and as we were now leaving, the ambulance crew was putting the man in the back of their vehicle. Helena and I took off. Now, here's the end, which is really quite interesting. This is from Helena. I was asking Wilfredo what he had seen because I stayed by the car. I saw the trooper fire the shots and had only heard the conversations. Wilfredo told me that it was a Bigfoot and it was still alive but badly bleeding, which was why the trooper decided to put it down. I said to Wilfredo that I couldn't wait to hear what the news reports would have to say about it the following day. But when the morning had come, there was nothing. We sat by the TV all day, waiting and waiting, and nothing at all was said. The next day, Wilfredo actually called the local news station and inquired about not hearing the story. They had said they knew nothing about any such story and asked Wilfredo what he had seen. Wilfredo must have spent 30 minutes on the phone with them recounting the entire story, and the next day, again, nothing was heard or said on the news, and nothing was in the local papers the entire week. We both knew what we had seen and heard, and yet not a word was spoken about it. We thought that surely there would be great interest in such a story that was never told.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Incredible.
It is incredible. You hear a lot of encounters like that to where someone hits it and then it just gets swept under the rug. I guarantee if you'd have went back down that highway a few hours later, the place would have been spotless. I've heard it a million times.
That's Wes. I just turned 60 years old in September. I was never what I would consider naive. But in recent decades, it seems the longer we go on, the more deception is out there in the forms of just lies to the public, as if somebody feels like they need to protect us from whatever. We can't make sound decisions on our own. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's amazing to me. Yeah, and I agree. I agree completely with what you just said. And happy birthday to you, by the way, Bill.
Thank you.
Did he go into any more descriptions beyond a black face? It looked like a gorilla. Was there anything else that he said to you that stuck out as far as details go?
Well, the conversation was extensive, and I try not to bombard the reader, with how many grains of sand were on the street.
Right.
But he told me that initially they thought it was a moose. It was a massive body, and even though he mentioned a bear, he was leaning more towards the moose because of the size. The teeth, he did mention that the teeth were large and like white in the light. The mouth was kind of a gape with the jaw hanging over, and the blood was pouring out of the side. I mean, this thing had gotten hit by a tractor trailer and obviously was bleeding severely internally. And it was just laying there on the side when they approached it. Now, the officer had, I believe, what he was describing as a mag light, a very powerful flashlight. So when he put it on him, there was no doubt in his mind. His initial description was that of a gorilla, but later on, having had time to think about it, he said it was a Bigfoot. This is a couple. They're naturalized citizens now, but a couple from Mexico, living here in the States, speaking somewhat broken English, but good. I mean, it wasn't like they weren't understandable, and this is the story that I put forth, after having, spoken to them.
Yeah, I'm really glad you did. And you can just picture how big this thing was. I mean, the damage that he describes that you just read to the front of that tractor trailer, you can hit a car and not cause that much damage. So that thing must have been huge for it to buckle in everything on the front of that truck. Tell us about the taxidermist. This is going to be in Volume 5, which isn't out yet, but we're still talking about bodies. Tell us about that, Bill.
Yeah, this is really, really interesting. This very strange and seemingly eerie account was told to me by Johnny Roth, a resident of Pennsylvania. Basically, here's what Johnny had to say. Yeah, I'm kind of reading this. The way I wrote is a little interesting. And this is Johnny speaking now. As I begin to tell you and your readers what it is that I saw, my thoughts are that I should preface it by briefly telling you of a singular event which happened during my childhood. I grew up in a neighborhood which consisted of 100 homes. There were obviously many families living within the community, and consequently many fathers who earned a living in a variety of different ways. One of the men who lived 6 houses down from me, Mr. Candelora, was named Mr. Candelora. He was by trade a taxidermist, which as a young man seemed rather cool and unique to me. I had a habit at the time of going into the woods with my BB gun and shooting birds and squirrels, which is something I wouldn't even consider doing now, but at the time I didn't care. One day I shot a blue jay. The thought had entered my mind that I would like to have it stuffed, so I brought it down to Mr. Candelora's house. When I got there and I showed it to him, he told me it was against the law to shoot blue jays and that he could be arrested if caught performing taxidermy on them. He had taught me a valuable lesson that day, which will come into play shortly. So here we go. As with everything else, I am sure that there are many people who, for the right price, would perform taxidermy acts on anything for anyone, with money, of course, being at the root of all things evil and the like. I will fast forward 20 years later to 1996, when I was employed by a major shipping and delivery firm. When I put on that delivery uniform, and as the people on the various routes got to know my face, I had carte blanche access to anywhere and everywhere within the confines of most businesses. I could walk behind counters into private offices in the course of making a delivery and never be stopped or questioned in the least. It was on this particular day that I had entered into a taxidermy shop, which was a somewhat regular stop on my route. When I entered the front door, Dave, who was the owner, pardon me for a second, was not behind the counter. and evidently had not heard me come in. I took the package, walked behind the counter, and went straight away into his workshop through a swinging door. Upon entering the shop, he had the radio playing very loudly with the bathroom door shut. So I knew that Dave was going to the bathroom or something. As I stood there waiting, I noticed a plastic drop cloth draped over a work table with blood and guts all over it. This was nothing new for me because it was typical of what you would see when entering his workroom. What was not typical was this. Smack dab in the middle of the table was a blood-soaked head of a Sasquatch with all of the guts, blood, and veins hanging out of the bottom of it. I knew immediately what I was looking at. The mouth of the beast had receded back, exposing an enormous set of yellowed teeth. There was nothing fake about it. Dave's business had nothing to do with things that were fake whatsoever. The creature's hair was all matted down and soaked with blood from being handled. There were guts and goo all around the head. Having seen enough, and while Dave was still in the bathroom, I stepped back out to the shop and moved in front of the counter to wait, as though I had not been in the back and seen anything. A few minutes later, I heard the bathroom door open, and in an attempt to appear as though I had just arrived, I shouted, "Hello!" Dave came out from the back room and greeted me in the usual way. I told him that I had a COD package for him. And as he started to write me a check, I asked him how his day was going, to which he said, "I'm in the middle of gutting a boar for someone." Now I knew he was lying to me, which firmed up that what I had seen was in fact a Bigfoot. There was no boar, which he was in the middle of prepping, but there was the head of a Sasquatch, which someone from somewhere had chopped off and asked him to mount. From that day forward, I had changed my entire opinion about him and about the existence of Sasquatch. Knowing what I knew and having learned it from Mr. Candelora as a youth, if shooting a blue jay or an eagle was against the law, Dave had to have been breaking the law by having this Sasquatch in his possession. I have no idea if there was an entire body anywhere in the shop, but I do know that there was most definitely a head, and it was sitting in the middle of Dave's table. So there you have it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one too as well. You would think if he was making like a fake head, there wouldn't be any guts or anything else inside of it. You know what I mean? The way he describes it, if this taxidermist was, and obviously you and I weren't there, but if it was, he was just making a head as a goof, why is there all the guts and everything, strings coming out of the neck where it's been chopped off? You know what I mean? Fascinating.
Yeah, and who knows the how or the why or the succession of events that led up to it being on his table? Was it frozen? Did it just happen somewhere in the hills of Pennsylvania? You have no idea. And, a thought came to my mind, and I'm going to pose this to you and the listeners. Think about this for a moment. Think of when a valuable painting or artifact is stolen from a museum. It can't be sold. It can't really be displayed. It's simply purchased by somebody who has the wherewithal to do so, to be kept in secret, for him or her to gaze upon when they want to. And for a price, there are those who can and will do almost anything, such as taxiderming the head of a Bigfoot.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, I would agree with that. That's probably exactly the situation. It's probably someone who has too much money and they want to, everyone's moral until you start flashing cash in front of them. Then all of a sudden the morals go out the window pretty quick. And so I could see a taxidermist, hey, do this for me. I'll pay you X amount of dollars. For the most part, most people have a price. You know what I mean? And they'll throw their morals out the window to do to do it.
Well, you have two people just in this story alone, and I love the way he prefaced his experience with an experience from his youth by another honest taxidermist who told him that, no, I can't taxiderm a blue jay for you. It's against the law to shoot them. And if I got caught doing this, trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, here's two different people and personalities at work, one willing to cross a line and one not. Now, are there laws against taxiderming a Bigfoot? They're not even agreeing there is a Bigfoot. But the idea of having something in your shop that is unknown, I don't know where to go with that,
Yeah, it is fascinating. And why would he make up a story like that? I mean, it's such a weird, especially the head of it. And you probably hit it right on the head, Bill. I mean, I don't know the backstory, but you're probably right. It's probably a millionaire or multimillionaire or more, and he wanted it done. I'm sure he would have gotten his blue jay taxidermed if he would have, flashed some real cash. I'm sure the taxidermist all of a sudden would have probably done it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Another thought comes to mind was, look today, what people are willing to do to still take down an elephant and steal the ivory.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, it's just there's no end to what some people are willing to do or risk.
Right. And that's a good example. It's, but the money's right, so people will do it. And they'll throw ethics and everything else out the window. Fascinating account. Tell us about the Tennessee tree stand. This is in volume 4, which is out, and the name of the book is Bigfoot Terror in the Woods. Pick it up on Amazon. William Sheehan. Bill, tell us about this. The Tennessee tree stand encounter, volume 4.
Yeah, now, just the one thing, Wes, the actual title of the book is Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. And I only mention that because having given no thought to the title other than that I liked it, there were a couple of other people out there who actually had penned some additions, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods.
You're absolutely right, Bill. Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters, volume 1 through 4. And you're absolutely right. On Amazon, there is Bigfoot Terror in the Woods. And I'll post a link. I'll go to Sasquatch Chronicles. I'll post a link to all 4 volumes. So you're getting Bill's book. But I apologize, Bill. You're absolutely right. No apology necessary. This Tennessee tree stand incident is just incredible. And this rather chilling account was brought to my attention by a bow hunter by the name of Shane Barkley. Basically, here's what Shane had to share with me about what happened to him on an early September morning. As I mentioned to you when I first contacted you, Bill, that this was the craziest damn thing imaginable. If it hadn't happened to me personally, I wouldn't have believed it. I still live and hunt in Tennessee, but I haven't been back into this area that I'm about to tell you about since the day of this incident, and with good reason. Prior to September 14th of 2014, this was one of my all-time best hunting spots without exception. On this particular day, the forecast was for clouds and drizzle in the morning, with the skies clearing in the afternoon. I had hiked in about a half mile or so to a place where I always left a stand fixed in a tree. In fact, I had just replaced this stand because the old one that was there was getting pretty rusty. That should tell you something in and of itself as to just how fond I was of this spot. This area was comprised of some of the thickest, most tightly packed forests that you will ever navigate. The bushes and trees in here, starting from the ground level and working their way up, were layered in height and density. If not for the occasional game trail, I don't believe that anybody in their right mind would attempt coming in here, but nobody ever said that I was in my right mind. I had made my way into this spot and was already comfortable sitting in the stand just at the break of dawn.
My stand was fixed at a height of about 25 feet, with climbing pins turned into the tree all the way up to it. I'm going to do my best to describe to you exactly where I was sitting and what it was that I could and could not see, as well as telling you why it was that I had chosen this area for my stand in the first place. The patch of forest was what I would call a depression within a depression. The surrounding area was a valley in between a pair of hills that were around 600 feet in elevation. There was an old and well-used game trail that ran just to the left of my stand and off due north, which was directly in front of me when sitting in the stand. The vast majority of the brush was between 4 and 8 feet tall, which one could by no means hunt in unless you could rise above it and look down on the trail. On most days, and as was the case on this morning, this bowl or depression was filled with damp, foggy mist that would eventually dissipate, but not until generally around 9 a.m. or later. My sight range from the seat was about 75 feet at best in all directions, and then the trees and brush seemed to vanish into the mist. It is a very ethereal thing to sit here alone, and it has even spooked me on more than one occasion. As I was sitting in hopes of my prey coming down the trail at any moment, I began to hear what I will describe to you as being owls. There were little hoots and screeches coming in succession. It had started as one and then progressed to the point where there were numerous screeches and hoots, all of which were coming from directly in front of me to my north. Being a hunter, it is virtually impossible for me to share with you in a few moments why I say what I am about to tell you. But the fact of the matter is and was that these sounds were not real. In other words, to my trained ear, knowing what the area's owls sound like, how they make their calls, and what time of day they make their calls, I knew these were being faked. Simply put, something or someone was mimicking the owl calls. One of the most telling aspects was the amount of calls being made and the fact that they were all in one area. The imagination can play some strange tricks on one's mind, especially when you are alone in the woods, especially when you are alone in the mist in such a location. Pardon me. I began to feel a sense of dread, and a cold chill ran through my body, a shiver. At that moment in time, and for the first time since I had been coming in here, which must have been several dozen or more, I was wishing I had brought a gun instead of a bow. I had never felt this way before, as I just said. It was as though my psychological state was taking a terrible tumble out of control, and there was nothing I could do to control my thoughts and emotions. As if things couldn't get any worse, they did. There was so much hooting and screeching going on that it sounded like a damn war party was going on in the fog in front of me. The thought had crossed my mind to climb down out of the stand and make my way out, but that thought was countered by that of just staying put, because I would be safer sitting off the ground. My heart was racing, and sweat was actually dripping from my brow. I couldn't believe how frightened I was, and it was escalating. What happened next was beyond belief. If you have never sat in or seen a folding tree stand, I was sitting on the seat portion, and my feet were resting on what I will call the floor of the stand. You could see through the entire stand and its components because it is more of a weave of a steel as opposed to being solid plate, which is done to keep it as lightweight as possible. My back was against this tree, which was maybe 16 inches in diameter, and I was 25 feet off the ground, which means that my feet were about 20 feet off the ground. As I sat there trembling, sweating, and by the way, having seen nothing up until this point, I suddenly felt something grab the heel of my left boot. I immediately jumped to the point of almost falling out of the stand, and as I turned my head to look down to my left, I was staring into the grimacing face of a huge Sasquatch. He was looking directly up at me, having snuck up behind me, and was reaching up with his left hand to grab hold of my boot. The very moment that I jumped, he let go and just stood there, kind of swaying and watching me. As he stood there, the thought ran through my mind that all of the rest of the activity and noises were just a distraction, which allowed this beast to walk up on me unaware. The thought of putting a broadhead right between his eyes was just one of many thoughts that was racing through my mind. I expected at any moment that he was going to grab the foot tray and yank the stand out of the tree to devour me. The size of this thing was unbelievable, and I don't expect you or anyone else to believe me either. He was grabbing at my heel with his hand 20 feet off the ground. You can do the math as to what type of size that equates into. It was just seconds after he had held my heel that he let go. The funny thing was that the grasp was not done with much, if any, pressure at all. It was as if it wanted me to know that it could do whatever it wanted, including sneaking up on me and touching me. He then turned and walked straightway down the trail in front of me. As he did so, all of the noises had stopped. The woods had suddenly and unexpectedly become dead silent. I think he took about 10 steps to cover 75 feet and disappeared into the mist and trees. It was at that moment that I realized I was pissing in my pants. I have no idea why. Call it caused by trauma or whatever you will, but I was peeing in my pants. I leaned with my back against a tree for almost 2 hours in somewhat of a delirium, feeling as though I was on some type of hard narcotic, which rendered me unable to think or act, and so I sat. I remember looking at my watch at 9:30 a.m. when I decided to move down the ladder. Everything at that moment in time was happening in slow motion. At least that's the way I perceived it. It seemed as though it took 20 minutes to get down the ladder, after which I sat under the tree for another half hour or more. I was staring down the trail where the Bigfoot had walked away, and I have no idea why. I was in a complete and utter daze. I remember looking at my watch when finally I had reached the car, and it was almost noon, having begun my morning in the stand only a half a mile from where I had parked to begin my hike. It was as if this encounter, and during it as well, that time had stood still. Yes, it was still passing, but I was totally and completely disconnected from reality. That week, I called out of work sick for 8 days. It took me that long to recover from this stupor. I went back into the spot many months later after winter had set in, and as I stood beneath the stand, I tried to make some sense of the events of that day. I looked up at the seat and visualized him reaching up and grabbing my boot. To do so, he would have had to be 14 or 15 feet tall with his arm extended beyond that. His arm had to have been 7 or 8 feet long. The game trail was only perhaps 2.5 feet wide, and this beast with its back to me seemed to be at least 3 times the trail's width at its shoulders. It had long gray and white hair with dark gray skin that was visible on its face and hands, as well as the upper chest as I looked down at it. Thinking back, The face seemed to have an incredibly evil smile. But is that just how I was perceiving him? Perhaps as Bigfoots go, he was very handsome and was actually smiling at me. The fact is that he grabbed my boot gently. He could have easily torn me from the chair and from the tree, and that would have been the end of the chair and me, but he didn't. And that's what has puzzled me. When he was walking away from me, I felt as though anesthesia was taking effect before surgery. That moment in time when suddenly you're drifting off and then you can't remember no more. However, I had taken nothing, and I had only the encounter to blame it on. It was the most bizarre event of my lifetime, and now you are part of it.
Well, that's an amazing encounter. That really is an amazing encounter. Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. And that one is actually from Volume 4. That's amazing, Bill. I mean, he's lucky that thing didn't drag him out of that tree stand.
Oh, my God. The terror. I get chills thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Well, you know what's fascinating is he talks about the smile. And I had Mike Woolley on. You hear him in the intro of the show. He's one of the guys that says its eyes are real, real evil. Similar situation, but he talked about it smiling. He said like a Joker smile. Almost not like a friendly smile, a very almost kind of evil smile. And when he said that, that made me think of that encounter. Very fascinating.
Yes, and think about, Wes, we hear, people say to me, are these stories true? And I say to them, what do you think? And the reason I say that is this. There's an old adage that says the following. To those who believe, no further evidence is needed. And to those who don't, no additional evidence will suffice. If you think about what has already been brought to the table evidentially about the existence of Bigfoot, if 1% of that evidential proof was brought into a courtroom with you or I being accused of some type of crime, we would be going away for a long time. And the other oddity is this. Is it Dr. Meldrum? Is that his name?
Yeah, Dr.
Meldrum up in Idaho?
Yeah.
He's that college professor that we see on television. Very astute man. This man is nobody's fool. I was listening to him one day talking about the dermal ridges on the footprints in some of the castings and whatnot. If you think about the FBI, the police department and whatnot, they use tire tracks, castings of tire tracks, castings of shoe prints to implicate people in crime, saying that this same pair of sneakers was in the suspect's closet. These are the tire tracks from Bill's pickup truck that was at the scene. And yet we have prints being identified by experts as being legitimate and not hoaxed, and everything is looked at under the same umbrella that it's all just one big joke. And really, it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with everything you just said. I can't disagree with anything. It's like when I have cops on the show, and I've had way more cops on the show than even the audience realizes, because a lot of times I don't say what they do for a living. But I can tell you I've had way more cops on the show than probably most people realize. And the interesting part is, a cop can take you off to jail, based on his good word. But why is it when they see Sasquatch now they're crazy? Everything else, you can take his good word for it. But when it comes to this, yeah, it's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. Fascinating account. Very fascinating account. That was from Volume 4. That's the Tennessee tree stand incident. Isn't that what you named it, Bill?
Yes. Yeah, just incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It is.
I mean, you can't, and I take this stand on this subject as I do with all things, Wes. Is everybody lying? Is everybody some type of fool? And if you take that stand, to what end? There's no money involved. There's only ridicule, embarrassment. Why bother? If you're somebody like me, I've got thick skin. I can handle a debate with anybody. I'll enter into the fray with anybody and anything. But I know everybody is not like me. Some people just cower away. Mum's the word. Don't say anything. Keep your job. Shut up. Whereas I, on the other hand, tend to be a little more bold. I talk to people about a number of different topics, and I want to hear what they have to say about it,
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill. I think in the Bigfoot world, you either develop thick skin or you leave. It's one or the other. The one encounter I really want to hear about is the fight. And when we come back, we'll talk about that. It was an encounter where there was two Sasquatches fighting. And when we come back, we'll be talking to Bill Sheehan about that. Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. Check it out on Amazon. Get your copy. And MyBookie is now sponsoring Sasquatch Chronicles. Join now, and MyBookie will match your deposit dollar for dollar. Use promo code Chronicles to activate the offer. Visit MyBookie today. That's MyBookie. And don't forget to use the promo code Chronicles when creating your account to claim the bonus. You play, you win, you get paid. And keep the emails coming in as far as your winnings go. I'm up about $350 myself. I know the Patriots hurt me pretty bad. I almost felt like sending Bill Belichick and Tom Brady a bill for my losses. I put a lot of eggs in that basket. But anyway, a lot of fun. So much fun to check it out if you get a chance. MyBookie. You don't have to bet a lot of money, but it's fun to play and it's fun to win. So definitely keep sending me your winnings and let me know how you're doing. I'll update the audience next week on that. I was going to have Tony Merkel back this week to give us his take on this week's games, just so you could bet on the complete opposite of what he said. And I'd like to say he didn't have the courage to show up, but in reality, Tony's probably working. I think he works like 14, 15 hours a day driving truck, so I can't break his balls too much on that. But I hope you guys are having as much fun with MyBookie as I am, and if you get a chance, check it out. I'll throw a link in the description. Let's jump back to Bill Sheehan. I really want to hear this fight encounter. This one's from Volume 2, and the name of the book is Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. It's basically a whole book full of encounters. Very cool. Bill, did this next encounter, the fight, did it take place in Canada?
Yeah, and one of the most amazing things, Wes, as I have so many accounts from Canada and older accounts as well, that it makes me wonder why it is the United States kind of took the forefront in the discovery of Bigfoot. Because it's my understanding now, being up to my neck in testimonials, the activity north of the border is incredible. And these creatures are just gigantic. But yet we don't hear anything from their side either. There's nothing in print. There's no testimonials coming forth. We don't really get information, and surely people up there are listening in on what we're talking about here in the States. But yet we don't really have any program or anything coming from there, which I thought was kind of unusual.
It is a little unusual. I have had people on from Canada. Is probably the second largest listening audience I have, next to Australia. And so I know that they're listening to the show. I mean, you'd be amazed how many people up there are actually listening to the show. I'm amazed by it. So I think that there is more that goes on there. I think Canadians generally, a lot of times they don't say much. They don't say much about it. You almost kind of, every once in a while, you would think there would be more. I guess I agree with you. You would think there would be more coming from Canada, and there's not. And I don't know why, because I know there's more going on up there.
Well, a lot of these accounts are, not all, but the preponderance of them is coming from water, a around water, lakes.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's a lot of fish up there. There's a lot of habitat. There's a lot of acreage that man has never touched. And, people have been going up there for decades on float planes, sleeping in cabins, roughing it to catch fantastic fish, hunt large bears and moose and all kinds of things. And, Wes, I go through life, and I believe that people are seeing things because they are looking. Most people go through life. They have eyes and they don't see. I am looking all the time at the heavens, at the sky, at the stars, at planes, at birds, at animals. When I'm out striped bass fishing, I'm looking at the bait, the surface of the water. I'm always looking. I'm always inquisitive. And because of that, I see. And although a lot of these encounters are accidental, a huge amount of them occur because these people are out there and doing things that the average person behind the desk is not doing. They're fishing, they're hunting, they're hiking, they're taking photographs, they're camping. All of these things that most people don't want to engage in, they're doing, and the encounters are occurring in front of their eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And so on this fight incident, they were actually fishing, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. And you're going to hear it. If it's okay with you, I'll begin.
Please do.
This story came to me by way of Brian Mahoney, who was at the time from Fargo, North Dakota. And here's the story as it was conveyed to me. I had been long tired of seeing the shows on TV with people banging logs on trees and never seeing anything. And when I ran across your query and decided to take you where the action is, in 1967, my dad and 3 other men in the neighborhood took me and 4 other boys on a trip up to Ontario to fish muskies. We found ourselves landing in Perrault's Falls Airport, where we met up with a couple of float planes that ferried us up to a place near Ear Falls. My only memory was that we had rented a pretty big cabin for the week with plenty of room for all of us to rough it. But heck, we didn't care at the time if we slept in the woods. We were up in the sticks, landing on water in a seaplane, and we were going muskie fishing. The dads had hired a guide whose name was Lars, and we had 3 boats for the group. The boats were pretty big, something like 18 or 20 feet, and they had plenty of power to get us around in a hurry. Several days into the trip, we had been into the fish hot and heavy every day, just as advertised. We were landing muskies in the range of 28 to 36 inches on a regular basis and having a ball. The fight of these fish pound for pound is outrageous if you've never caught them. Most of the shoreline that we were fishing had forests coming right down to the water's edge, but periodically there was an area of bank with no trees that was visible along the shore. We had been fishing every day facing the shore and pretty close to it. It must have been about 4 p.m. when we heard a loud and long roar coming from out in the woods. We all looked at each other and asked Lars, "What the hell is that?" He said that it sounded like a large grizzly bear. It was only 2 minutes after we heard the first roar that another one sounded off, coming from the opposite direction in the woods. There must be either 2 of them or one very fast runner. Over the next 15 minutes or so, as we sat fishing the bank, we heard several more roars. It seemed like they were being made back and forth by 2 different bears. At least that's what we thought at the time. Now, before I continue, I have to set you up visually for what was about to happen. We were sitting in 3 boats spaced maybe 150 feet apart. All of these boats were about 100 feet from the shore, facing one of these slopes on the bank that I told you about. The water we were fishing was approximately 6 feet deep, and the bottom was covered with the grasses that these muskies hung around in. We were all looking at each other from boat to boat as we listened to these roars, which sounded like they were getting closer. I'm just turning the page here. Closer and closer to our position. I don't know why, but I felt personally like a fuse had been lit and a bomb was about to explode, and explode it did. Suddenly, the woods directly in front of us erupted in what I can only describe as a lion fight. The volume and intensity of the roaring was so loud that it hurt my ears. I couldn't see what was making the noise yet. I looked at the other boats to my right, and Lars was already waving to start the motors. As we started the engines, we were now all motoring further away from the shoreline, but everyone was still looking back at the trees. The roars almost drowned out the sound of our engines at times. We switched into neutral. All the boats were now 300 feet from the shore, facing the woods. It was so intense that I was trembling. I could now make out 2 large dark figures engaging in an apparent battle for supremacy just inside of the tree line. The roaring was unrelenting as the struggle ensued within the trees. At one point, I almost felt as though I was going to faint. I really can't find the words to describe my emotions. Right at the time when I thought that things couldn't possibly get any worse, these 2 giant black beasts came tumbling out of the trees, rolling down the embankment, smacking and biting each other. Both of the beasts were now in the water, and every time one started to stand, the other would slap it, and they would grapple, smashing each other into the water. Each time one bit the other, the screams of pain were even louder than when they had been apart. I remember thinking that I wanted it to stop watching and listening, but I couldn't. I could tell that one of the beasts was starting to get the better of the other, and finally, with one titanic blow, the creature's body buckled to the ground, and it lay there unmoving. The victor stood leering over the other, growling ever more intensely and pounding its chest in the moment. It reminded me of when King Kong beat the dinosaur. I thought the downed beast was dead. It lay half in the water and half out, face down and not moving. Then the other beast turned to face us, and raising its head into the air, letting out what sounded like a half roar and a half scream as it pumped its fist and flexed its upper body. It then turned to the victim and stood over it, roaring over and over again. A few minutes later, it walked up to the bank, roaring and screaming, going into the woods. Everybody in the boats was shell-shocked, and our mouths hung open. Some of the guys were holding their heads like they were losing their minds, and none of us could speak. I saw the beast that was laying in the water lift its arm and drop it like it was its last gasp. We motored away and headed back to the lodge for the evening. Now, I won't get into all of the conversation and whatnot that went on that night because there's much more to tell you about these beasts. I had never heard a grizzly bear in my life. But when Lars said the roars sounded like a big grizzly, something had told me that it was not true. Up until that point in my life, I had never heard anything living make a sound that loud. It was as intense as a diesel train's whistle. Had it been closer, it may have broken our eardrums, and when they were fighting in front of us, some of the other guys actually had their hand to their ears. The oars that were laying on the aluminum boat seats were vibrating loudly. It's just, I got a little more to go here with. This is just
it's
totally
great.
out of the box.
It's great.
Another thing was the fight itself. At no time during the fight did they hit each other with a closed fist. They were slapping each other open-handed, grappling and biting. It seemed to me that the biting was used to get an advantage during what appeared to be a wrestling match of mammoth proportions. The fight had been so intense that I couldn't understand how either of them could withstand another second before one of them had dropped. Lars went back to the scene the next day, and the one in the water was gone, so maybe it had survived, but we will never know. When they were slapping and thrashing each other around in the water, the waves they were creating were rocking our boats far off the shore. They were incredibly large, and when their mouths were open and roaring, in particular the one that in the end was looking at us while roaring, I could see huge white teeth, and it looked like a bowling ball could have fit into the mouth with no problem. The two of them had to be in excess of 10 feet tall and maybe 2,000 pounds. When they were slamming each other against the ground, I could feel the reverberations out in the water, and you could hear the hit. This had to be some type of animalistic fight for territory or domination of the females. It was like they were calling each other to the duel, and neither was going to back down. In my opinion, these are vicious and bloodthirsty wild beasts that are not to be trifled with. But there are people walking around in the woods with no guns who must be out of their mind, thinking they're going to visit Mr. Happy of the Forest. These are his words. One of these monsters could easily take a full-grown man and throw him into orbit. This type of physical strength and force is something that we know nothing about and quite possibly never will.
It's kind of hard to disagree with anything he just said. Bigfoot, Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. And I know that one's titled The Fight. That's in Volume 2. I'm in Volume 1. I might have to break away and go read that one in Volume 2. That's fascinating. You know what's interesting about what he just said is I had the two brothers on a long time ago. Anyway, I've talked to them many times. Everyone knows what I mean. The woman in white, the two brothers. Anyway, they had seen these creatures fight, and it's very much like he just described. They said it was a lot of open slaps. It was like watching two wrestlers go at it. Not so much boxers, but like two wrestlers go at it. That's terrifying, man. Can you imagine being in that boat? I'd be like, let's get the hell out of here.
Wes, I can't. I just can't. But if as you just heard, these guys were at a point where they were basically mesmerized or numb, if you will. Think of the shock of what was transpiring in front of them, and here they are out in the peace and quiet of Canada, muskie fishing, when this unfurls in front of them, if you will. I mean, it's just incredible to be sitting there with the waves. These beasts were creating waves, thrashing each other around in the shallow water, and the waves were reaching the boats. And then he said that the oars laying on the aluminum seats were vibrating from the volume of the sound that they were creating during this fight. I mean, that is just incredible.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of modern day and even historical accounts that read just like that. Of what people actually witnessed. And I hope the audience goes out there and checks out the book. It's kind of cool. You know, the encounters are only a couple pages or a page or two. It's not a lot of reading material, but you pulled together some really cool encounters throughout all 4 volumes of the book, of all of these books. So I really hope people go out there and check it out. Tell us about the practice pit. Now, this is going to be in Volume 5, which is not out yet. The practice pit soon will be out. Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. It's going to be in Volume 5.
5 and actually 6 are being proofed right now, so they'll probably by the end of October. But this event, once again proves you talk about violence. To me, these are wild animals. I hear a lot about this human hybrid, all of this different. I'm total disagreement with the notion of these being a human hybrid. I believe these are just another part of the creation that we know very little about. The numbers of them, who knows? To me, if you encounter them and walk away, you are lucky. Perhaps you got them on a good day or they weren't hungry, but in no way, shape, or form would I want to come in contact with them, whether I had my shotgun with me or whether I did not. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
I do not think it's a good idea to extend your hand to a raccoon in your backyard, and I don't think it's a good idea to get too close to a Bigfoot.
It's so funny you said that. I said that on Friday night's show. I said,
really?
I love raccoons. I think they're about the cutest little thing on the planet, but I'm not going to get within 10 feet of one because that rat's going to throw me a beating like I've never seen before, and I'm going to be at its mercy. It's funny you say that because I said almost the same thing. I was like, 20-pound rat's going to come after you, and you're at its mercy. But I didn't mean to cut you off, Bill.
No, I'm really enjoying this immensely because so much time and effort has gone into this that it's just a pleasure to be on a venue such as yours with the work that you do and the work that you put in. I enjoy immensely your presentations, the ease with which you interview people. Frankly, I feel very comfortable talking to you. I feel like I've known you for 20 years. I
appreciate that, man. It's funny because for the audience listening, when Bill and I were talking about kind of laying out encounters, a lot of times when you bring an author on, they never share their good stuff. They'll give you kind of a half-assed, then go buy the book. Bill was like, I got 30 encounters for you. We can talk about all of them. I was like, well, it's not a 5-hour show, but I'm so glad because you're bringing the best, and I love the way the book is written. I really do, and I am trying to promote it because I do like the way it's written, and I hope the audience, if you love Sasquatch Chronicles and you love listening to people's encounters, you'll absolutely love Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters, the first 4 volumes, and I can't wait for volume 5 and 6 to come out.
And by the way, Wes, I really appreciate your comments about your thoughts about me bringing the best to the table. I could have brought 100 encounters to the table that were on par with or equal with what we're talking about today. The amount of material that people are encountering out there is overwhelming. And the fact that we're getting it in dribs and drabs, or there is no particular venue other than somebody like yourself to get it from, is just mind-boggling to me. But I digress. Let me bring you into the practice pit, which when I heard this, I was actually teary-eyed a little bit. I mean, I'm not so much of a mush, but certain things move me, particularly when you think of the grief involved. Yes, I know there are tears of joy, but, I remember listening to you a while ago when that gentleman passed away that you were obviously very close to. And when you were speaking of him, you were choked up and whatnot, and I said, wow, this guy has a heart. The fact that he would get on the air and publicly expose himself, that, you loved or cared for this individual so much that in speaking to him, you were just obviously choked up. But I don't want to dwell on that. I just wanted you to know that I appreciate that.
No, I appreciate you saying that. And the doc, that was a hard show to do. That was a very, very hard show for me to do. I almost didn't put it out because I couldn't. I appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much. And I cringe every time I hear someone talk about that show because, it's I'm a big tough guy, right? You're not supposed to shed a tear, and I shed a lot of tears for him. So
no, I can appreciate that, and I've been down that road more times than I want to remember. So the following story was told to me by Cole Adams. Currently lives in Kansas, and here's what Cole had to say. In the early 80s, I was living with several other guys in somewhat of a communal arrangement in the Pacific Northwest. I'd rather not give specifics about exactly where, because should my old friend's wife ever read this, it would reopen some very nasty wounds which are better left closed. The fact that I mentioned this communal style of living has absolutely nothing to do with what had happened. I simply mention it in order to give you a window into my life. I had made a friend of a fellow named Chip Hayes. The two of us spent a fair amount of time together racing dirt bikes. We also liked to shoot together, and Chip was a hardcore hunter at heart, whereas I was more or less given to target shooting, not willing to put forth the effort and the commitment needed to hunt with Chip. At any rate, we had a nearby place where someone through the years had dug out a long cut through the earth with a dozer. The cut ended with a tall hillside of dirt at the back end of it. Chip had named it the Pit, while I like to call it the shooting gallery. The cut ran downhill on a slight grade for about 400 feet, and at the back end, the wall of dirt was about 40 feet tall. We had some picnic tables to rest our gun and arms on, and we used to go there to target shoot and sight in our rifles. On September 27, 1981, the weather was turning lousy, and it had started to drizzle outside. It was at about 4 p.m. when my phone began to ring, and I picked it up. On the other end was Lana, Chip's wife. Now, they only had one vehicle, and that was Chip's truck. She said that Chip had gone down to the pit earlier in the day, adding that he was going to sight in his rifle for an upcoming hunt. 6 hours had passed, and when she was getting a little worried about him not having returned, I told her, "Say no more, I'm heading over there right now." I jumped in the truck and drove immediately over to the pit to check on Chip. The pit was about 15 or 20 miles from my house, and by the time I got there, the day was already turning to night. Chip's truck was parked right near the entry area, but Chip was not visible in the cab, nor did I see him anywhere in the pit, the entirety of which was wide open to the eyes. I got out of the truck and could see Chip's gear on one of the tables, and yet no gun and no sign of Chip. So I started shouting out his name. There was no response, and I have to tell you, I was getting more than a little worried. I suddenly had a really bad vibe that something awful had gone down. That's all I can say. Looking at the back corner of the pit's rear wall, I could see, based on the way the dirt was disturbed, that someone or something had climbed up or down the dirt wall in the corner. I thought that it was Chip, who may have climbed up there to do a little squirrel hunting or something of the sort. The rain was coming down heavier as I climbed up the corner myself. Once on top, I was looking around and immediately saw Chip's Minnesota Vikings hat laying on the ground. When I walked over to pick it up, the ground surrounding it was soaked in blood. There were large footprints all over the ground. I am talking about size 20, super duper large. I put all these X's in there. And they appeared to be from a gigantic barefoot human. Call it intuition or whatever you like, but I felt compelled to walk in a certain direction. Within a short distance from the edge of the woods, I came upon Chip's 30-06 bent in half and laying on the ground. I started screaming his name in every direction, and no response was heard. Suspecting foul play, I headed right down to where his truck was parked, only to find more of the same. Large footprints were surrounding the entire vehicle. Looking first in the window, and then upon entering or opening the door, I had to try all I could not to heave right on the spot. I knew that I was looking at Chip, but it didn't register in my brain in the moment as to what exactly had happened. Chip was dead. His eyes were bulging out of the sockets, with his body having been folded in half backwards, and he was stuffed in front of the front seat under the dashboard on the passenger side of the cab. I started to sob profusely, holding my head while leaning on the hood of his truck. There would be no helping him now. His fate had been sealed. I tried to compose myself, and I jumped in my truck to go for help. Keep in mind that this was way before cell phones, and there weren't any phone booths out here either. With this pit being in the middle of nowhere, I was racing down the highway at 100 miles per hour when I saw a trooper up ahead. Pulling over, I jumped out of the car and ran to him. I could see that he was already startled at my appearance. I told him that there had been a killing, and as I was talking to him, he was already on the radio calling for backup. Leaving my truck on the shoulder of the highway, I jumped into his cruiser, and the two of us raced back to the pit. When we got there, another unit was arriving, and a third soon followed. Nobody could believe what it was that we were looking at. I took two of the officers up the hill to see the area where I found the blood, his cap, and his gun. To a man, they never expected to see what they were now looking at. Chip and Lana were very good friends of mine, and I knew the responsibility was to be mine and mine alone to break this hideous news to Lana. That was almost 40 years ago. I still can't break the hold that the events of that day have had on my life. At the time, I never gave much thought to the existence of Bigfoot, but my opinion now is this. Chip and I had spent hundreds of hours together at the pit, and never once did we venture into the woods surrounding it. We simply parked, set up our targets, shot at them, walked back and forth checking on the results. I believe that on that day, Chip had come to do what we always did. But when I got there, there were no targets that had been set up. My hunch is that he arrived, saw a Bigfoot walking along the top of the back wall, chambered around, and took a shot at it. I think that after the shot, he climbed up the hill expecting to see his trophy, but in a cruel twist of fate, the beast, not being dead, got the jump on him and killed him instead. Then, in a final act of vengeance, the Bigfoot bent up his gun and shoved his body in the most gruesome fashion under the dashboard of his truck. I have long since moved from that area of the country, but I keep in touch with Lana to this day. She has remarried and has 3 children. Thankfully, she has never seen the condition that Chip was in. When I saw him, neither I nor the police told her. It was reported that he had been killed, presumably by a bear, and that's the way the whole affair ended.
Tragic, isn't it? Isn't that tragic? I mean,
Yeah.
I think that goes on more than people want to really admit, and it's always blamed on a bear. Always blamed on a bear. And a bear's not going to fold you in half and stuff you underneath your... You can always tell when it's a Sasquatch because, bending the rifle. You know how many encounters I've had of people coming up missing, hunters coming up missing, and their rifles are bent, they're stuffed in a tree. And it sounds like Chip was kind of stuffed in his truck. It's tragic, man. That's a sad story.
Yeah. It shows you a couple of things. Now, again, I don't believe these things are human at all. But to say that animals don't have certain knowledge or skills available is ludicrous. These creatures could easily... take this, for example, Wes. You know that they say that a crow has the ability to solve a 6-piece puzzle?
Yeah, I think I read one time a crow is actually as smart as an 8-year-old human. And I found that fascinating. Incredible. Yeah.
And we look at them like, pull out your shotgun and blast them out of the sky. But these creatures are able to do things. My belief is that especially any creature that was created with a set of hands and fingers was given them for a reason. You get back to the raccoon. I have raccoons in my yard that can negotiate a lid off of a garbage can if it's not too heavily set in place. You see them grabbing things, holding things in their hands, manipulating them around. They know when it's time to get out of Dodge when they see something they don't like. These creatures, these Bigfoots, obviously know, some of them, this thing was living by the pit. If it wasn't living there, what was it doing walking by there on that day? It had to have known that at the very least a gun was held by a human and it made a lot of noise, maybe that it didn't like. But on this particular day, if he was correct in his presumption that Chip had fired on this thing and gone to look at it, which to me was as good a hunch as any in my opinion, this thing now was the victim of the bad end of this gun and was none too happy about it. So just incredible. This obviously knew how to open the door on the truck.
Right.
It closed the door on the truck because he opened it to find the body. I mean, what can you say?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's a fascinating account. And the part about it, and for the listeners out there, I know I sound like a salesman, but Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters, very cool. I mean, you can read account after account after account, and a lot of them are like this, to where it's just fascinating. And it's terrifying, really. That got wrote off as a bear. It did.
Yes, absolutely.
And probably his wife or his ex-wife now, or widow, probably thinks he was killed by a bear.
Yeah, well, she's better off, actually. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would agree. And
ignorance
is bliss.
That's what the buddy had decided. I'm not going to venture down that road. We're telling Lana that Chip had got torn up by a Bigfoot and stuffed behind the dashboard of his truck.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
personally, I think he did the right thing.
I agree.
Just withholding whatever he felt he had to withhold at that moment in time, and.
Well, let me ask you, Bill. I mean, you've been taking encounters now. You got 4 fantastic books with chock full of encounters. What do you think Sasquatch is? I know you kind of alluded to it earlier, but if someone were to ask you, "Hey, Bill, what do you think Sasquatch is?" What would you say to them?
I say to them that this thing is a member of the animal kingdom. They've been around for a long, long time. Just because you don't encounter them doesn't mean they don't exist. I put in the foreword of Volume 1 in the introduction of the series that I've been a bird watcher for more years than I'd like to think. And I saw my first snowy owl about a year ago after 60 years of bird watching. So I don't expect that anytime soon, if I was living in a region where they're purported to be, that I would just walk out my back door and see them. But I tell you what, knowing the type of person that I am, if I lived regionally in a place where I was outdoors, which I would be, I would fully expect that in my lifetime, I would see at least one of them or not more. And again, that's because I'm looking. I think they are a creation. You know, right, I've given this much thought because people are always egging me on about the stories in the book. And, of course, the non-believers are very vocal and, laughing and cracking jokes sarcastically. Think about the discovery of the dinosaur, Wes. One man who once again was out there looking sees a bone sticking out of the side of an eroded hill and decides to start excavating it. And then the whole landslide of what we know the dinosaurs to be now began with a bone hanging out of a hillside. When people say, where are the bodies? Well, I opened up today with talking about some bodies, but my opinion in the natural realm is that if these creatures simply bury their dead, and if these dead Bigfoot are buried in wooded areas, the only way they would ever be discovered is if, per se, a shopping center was built where they were buried and the backhoes came in and unearthed them. You're not going to find their skeleton out in the middle of the Tongass National Forest. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. I mean, that pretty much says it for me, I mean, they are a creation. The count on them may not be that great, but because they're not just running around all over the place, it doesn't mean that they're not out there.
Yeah,
that's my opinion. What?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you sharing it. And I I agree with you. It's on Friday night show. Matt was talking about the coelacanth, and he was talking about how scientists say, oh, the coelacanth was it died off millions and millions and millions and millions of years ago, and we all accept it. We're like, well, these are scientists; they must know what they're talking about, right? Well, fast forward to some hillbilly over in Asia that likes to go out and fish coelacanth and eat them every night. Here's a guy in modern times eating coelacanth, and they're like, well, this dinosauric fish, it died off millions of, take my good word for it, it died off millions and millions of years ago. And then you can watch a video of this guy cooking up coelacanth every night for his family that he's caught, and so we don't know everything. And just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I hate to break your ego, and I don't mean you, Bill. I'm talking to the skeptics. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I've never seen an alien. I'm pretty sure they exist. Now, what they are, we can argue, but there's something going on out in the woods. Too many people are coming forward and saying, I've seen this. And the crazy part, none of these people know each other, yet they seem to describe the exact same thing they're seeing. Obviously, there's little differences from one territory to the next, whether it's East Coast, West Coast, Canada, Mexico. There's some slight differences, but for the most part, everyone's seeing the same thing. And you talked about evidence earlier with footprints, sounds, and it almost becomes, I think Bigfoot is too close to us, and it makes people uncomfortable realizing something that close to us might be out there running around. Whether it's human, whether it's an ape, whether it's an alien, no one knows. And, all these Bigfoot researchers, they'll tell you exactly what Sasquatch is. I'm here to tell you they're full of crap because none of them know. They're giving their theories and their opinions, but at the end of the day, no one knows. And I love Bigfoot Terror in the Woods sightings and encounters because it's one encounter after another, after it's testimony after testimony after testimony. And they aren't just like roadside crossings. I mean, they're fascinating encounters where there's a lot of details given. So my hat goes off to you, Bill. I think you did a great job with the books. I'm only on volume 1. I haven't gotten to 2, 3, or 4 yet, but I will. And I can't wait to read 5 and 6 because there's some really cool encounters in here.
Yes, and there are a couple of what I would call very strange encounters. The Dead Falls Lake Affair, the Disappearing Man, the Orb. They bring a totally different dimension to Bigfoot. But, again, who's to know? Who's to know exactly the how and the why? We are simply left with the God-given ability to observe and then to let these thoughts run through the process in our minds and in our hearts as to trying to make something out of what we have seen or experienced. These people, they have no axe to grind. I am not paying them. They simply want to share what happened with somebody who is willing to listen. I think I told you, Wes, if I didn't, I'll just mention it briefly and we don't have to go down this road. I actually had my life saved by an angel. And I share the story all the time because I want to open people up to that possibility, and I want to hear what those have to say who respond to it in a positive way. And you would be blown away to hear the conversations that people have told me after I breached the subject with them about what happened to me. There are countless people out there, men, women, children, people from every age group imaginable, every walk of life that are experiencing incredible things, and they don't say anything, they don't have an outlet, and it's almost like they want to talk about it. When you interview somebody, Wes, and they break down in tears, you are unearthing something within them that owns a piece of them. It's something repressed. They want to get it out. They've been dying to tell somebody, but nobody would listen. And that in itself is an incredible thing.
Yeah, it is.
To be,
Yeah, no, and I didn't mean to cut you off, Bill, but yeah, no, it is. And I'll have to have you back for a part 2 because now I got to hear your angel story. I got one to share with you, my own.
See?
Yeah, and I don't know if he was an angel. I'm telling you right now, there's something very different about this homeless man I ran into. But we can go into that on a second show. Bigfoot Terror in the woods, sightings and encounters. And you're right, Bill. I mean, people come on, they share personal things. Someone just gave me and I know he's going to be listening, so I'll have to be careful. I filter what I'm about to say. I felt like he was giving me a hard time for not calling people out on the air and not, and my point to him was, why would I do that? Someone's sharing something very personal to them, something that happened in their life. Why would I bring them on and turn it into an interrogation like they've committed a crime? I'll never have anyone else come forward. I wouldn't want to be sitting in an interview and it's an interrogation. It wouldn't make me comfortable. Why would I do that to someone else? And, I just respect people's time, that come forward. And I think that's where you're going with it, is you respect people's time when they come forward and they share something very I've had many conversations on the phone where people are breaking down. I've had grown men, very large, scary grown men, break down in tears on the phone over what they've seen. And you got to hear people out. It's like the doc used to tell me. I know we brought him up, but the doc used to tell me all the time, Wes, hear everyone out. Doesn't mean you got to believe everyone, but you have to hear everyone out. Someone's going to say something to you one day, and then further down the road, someone's going to say something else, and you're going to be like, oh, I heard that before. I've heard this very similar before in this situation. Let me tell you about it. And he said, that's how you come to answers with what we're dealing with. And that's why I like your book, because it's encounters. You get to hear about what people are describing, what happened. I think you get so much information from that. And I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share the encounters, because I know you don't have to take your time, Bill. Your time is precious, just like mine. And the fact that you would come on, share it, I really hope people go out and buy the book. And the links will be on SasquatchChronicles.com. Definitely check out Bill's book. Bill, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you being here, and I mean that.
Wes, it was a pleasure. And, if you decide to have me back on, there is plenty of grist for the mill.
You're coming back, Bill. Usually I ask, but you're coming back. If I got to drag you back on the air, you're coming back.
And listen, if you're ever in my neck of the woods out here on Long Island, I'll take you out and show you how to catch a striped bass.
You got it, brother. You got it. Thanks again, Bill.
Thank you, Wes. Take care of yourself.
Bill, thank you so much for coming on. And I want to remind the audience again, go out and buy his book. There's 4 volumes, but it's Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, Sightings and Encounters. It's W.J. Sheehan, William Sheehan, or Bill. Gosh, he did such a great job with that book. I really enjoyed reading it. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And I don't want to forget this. I want to give a shout out to Sasquatch Syndicate, Chuck. He was kind enough to call me up and say, hey, brother, come on down. You can meet the people of Tombstone. I know you guys heard me talk about that 2 weeks ago, but a big portion of that was because of Chuck. Chuck said, come down, I got you. So Chuck from the Sasquatch Syndicate podcast, thank you so much. Until next time, everyone.
Someone is a human and